Hey everyone.
Hey.
Welcome to another DMALA. Thank you for joining us. We have our regular crew here, Michael Mondragon, who is leading everything. Warren, you're not Michael.
Oh,
We do have Warren Deaton here.
I just thought we'd all wave. Oh, well.
Katie Isabel is here with us, and Mike White at Hello Trilly here, and our very special guest, Lisa Poje at Poje Motion is here to talk a little bit about her work. Thanks for coming, Lisa. Before we get started, does anyone have any exciting news to share with regards to animation or any kind of cool stuff like that?
I just heard it looks good on what I've been designing all day today. So,
hey, that's
my
good
design's
news.
approved.
Always good news. I do have a couple of just quick notes that I'm sure that our audience knows already. That S24 Cinema 4D was announced and released, and it means that the subscription version of Cinema 4D is available. It also was announced that Redshift is now available for the new Mac, and it's also going to run if you're running Big Sur, so it can run on the Mac. Also, there's news coming out, and I don't know, I haven't seen the press release out yet, but I know that it was supposed to come out today on Thursday. There was an announcement from Grayscale Gorilla about their new subscription service for everything that they offer as part of a library service that is much, much cheaper than if you were to buy every component individually. And that shows up in a hub within Cinema 4D, as you would suspect, like a content browser. But with the subscription, you get access to everything, including, plugins and new materials that they're designing regularly, and all of the tutorial information that's on the site. So that's kind of a big deal for not just people who use Grayscale Gorilla stuff now, but anyone who's thought it was a little bit too much to get all of this at once. The subscription makes it a little bit easier to get all of it for a single low price. But that's it for news that I know of. But our big news is Lisa. And Lisa is an animator, motion designer from NASA JPL. And for anyone joining us live, I'd ask if you know, and something we were talking about before we went to air, does anyone know the name of the two NASA logos? Without going to Wikipedia, can you name the two NASA logos? And also, as a bonus, if you do know the two NASA logos names or nicknames, do you know why they're called that, other than the obvious? But I'll just throw those out there.
Yeah, put them in the comments.
All right, so Lisa, what are we looking at today? This project that you've been working on.
Yeah, it's a project that is basically explaining processes of potential plumes on a moon. And so it kind of explains the whole project explains how they could work if there's an ocean or if there's like a pocket of liquid that's blowing them out. So I used Cinema and I used After Effects. So it's just kind of basically the process of going between Cinema and After Effects. And really, I'm not like a big 3D person. I'm pretty new to it. So most of the stuff in Cinema is all like primitives, and like, I think I was using Cinema 4D Lite at the time. So it was like literally how can I hack this to make it look like I want it to? And then from there, I took everything into After Effects and sort of made it look a lot more presentable and interesting, because that's really my domain. That's where I'm good at doing and making things look really cool. So yeah, so this is basically just a going through that and a couple different things that I did that I think to me maybe is kind of unique in the way that I work. So yeah.
That's great. Should we take a look?
Yeah.
Great.
To do was kind of walk through this project and show you kind of different things that I did to achieve certain parts of this and sort of optimize the workflow, knowing that there's going to be a ton of changes. There's no VO or anything to work to. It's just going to be played with somebody talking to it. So I had to time everything kind of just based on what felt right. And then farther down the line, you know, I'd give it to the scientist and they would practice with it and be like, I need 10 more seconds here, or I need like 5 seconds in a different spot. And so I needed to build this in a way that was really easy to sort of add time and shift things and not have to take a ton of time re-rendering everything. I also wanted to make it partly in cinema so that I could have the flexibility of camera movements, but I'm also not super strong in cinema. So I kind of tried to go with the bare basics of you know, a square and went from there, which really helped out. But I didn't know necessarily what angle it would be at, or if we wanted to rotate around this thing, or what the movements would be. So I really wanted to start in that, but then finish it all up in After Effects. So I'm just going to go through a couple different things of how I achieved this and how I brought everything from cinema to After Effects and then sort of beautified it and added all the fun, fancy things in After Effects. What I did was got the animation movements down first. So I knew sort of timed out the movements, the transitions from one element to another, making sure that there was only one frame of still between each movement so that I could retime it later. This helped me take a lot of the extra render time down, so I never really had to render anything else from cinema if there was a timing change. For the texturing, so this is for the solid ice, I made different pieces that I could use for texturing for different parts of the cube. And then I had different ice or ocean layers that I painted, and some ice top layers that would kind of be sort of translucent. In order to get this stuff into After Effects, I just added a external compositing tag to different pieces of the ice that I knew I wanted to add stuff to, and so I could just get the general position of them. You can see here I built these grids that show me essentially in 3D space where in After Effects 3D space things are on this actual block, and it moves with it. So anything that I position obviously in this sort of 3D space, it will move with it. So in order to make these look somewhat nice, because I didn't do the greatest lighting or texturing or anything in cinema, I wanted to add and enhance it in After Effects. So a lot of what I did was adding these Photoshop files that I painted onto it using those grids, so I knew where things were placed. And these are actually all positioned in 3D space around that block. So they'll move with it, they'll look and change perspective as the camera moves. Another thing that I did was adding adjustment layers in 3D space to sort of enhance the look of these. ice blocks. So I did all of this in the pre-comp, which is essentially an enhanced version of the cinema render that we had.
Awesome. So that's a really great, we all started from primitive objects in Cinema 4D at one point. Everyone did. It's one of those things that we think, it's great that we have these, and it's great to see that, a simple object can mean so much more just by adding some textures to it. I was just wondering if there are any comments on Dragon?
Not yet.
No? All right. So in your process between the Cinema 4D, do you go somewhere else right away? Do you tweak in Cinema 4D a bunch, or?
Well, a lot of times I'll actually use the cinema. So I'll bring, instead of rendering it, I just bring the file into After Effects and just import everything so that I can either import the camera into After Effects and add 3D stuff in After Effects to it there, or go back and forth between After Effects and Cinema. Like if I'm in adding things in After Effects and it's not like lining up, or I need to retime something, sometimes I'll go back to Cinema, fix the animation, and it updates automatically when you have the actual file, which is crazy that you can do that. And once that became a thing, it was like, this is the greatest. I mean, that was a while ago now, but like it used to be really difficult to get Cinema stuff into After Effects. So yeah, so it's usually just constantly going between the two. Very rarely, unless it's bogging down my computer, do I actually render the thing. I usually just bring the file directly into After Effects and keep adding stuff to it.
So is that, can we see a little bit in this next section?
You're going to see a lot of adding a lot of After Effects stuff to the Cinema stuff in this next section.
Excellent. So let's take a look at that.
This camera, which has all the keyframe data that we need. And from here, what I did was brought it into one of the final comps here, which has plumes, and it has a sun, and it has these grayish, blackish marks that fall, which are called fans. So there's all this extra stuff that had to be added, and then also retimed to match speed for how fast someone could talk about what's going on. So here's my main pre-comp, the one that we adjusted and made look pretty, and it's beautiful, right? Well, essentially what I did was retime this. I kept the number of frames between transitions the same. After that, you could have as much time in between them as you want. It's not going to move anywhere. So you could have whatever you want going on up here for however long you want. And so you can infinitely retime it. And that's what I did for all of these. So it went from, what is this? This is a 6-second animation, and this ends up being 2 minutes. But it's kind of nice because I never have to re-render the Cinema stuff, and I can just retime it to whatever I need it to be. So from there, we have the dressed up Cinema render. We add a background. I added some, just add those because it looks better, some adjustment layers that make everything look a lot nicer. Most of them are just levels, I believe. There's a bit of a glow, levels, noise. I always add noise to everything. And some chromatic aberration to be really, really cool. I also have the grids in here and planes so that I know in this 3D space where everything is. I copy and pasted the camera from the pre-comp into here, and also had to move those keyframes down, which is why you see a lot of these markers that kind of don't make sense anymore, but that used to be where 2 was, and now 2 is over here. Okay, so from here I added a few more things. The gas that builds up, the sun, some crazy arrows to show some crazy wind directions. I added some plumes. Here are the plumes. There we go. Plumes and fans. So this level is sort of where that bend of the plume is. So whenever I moved anything back, if it was down over here where there's like thinner ice, then this would need to go up a little bit farther. It was basically just to keep it all sort of in perspective correctly. These are just 2D pre-comps as well, which I will go into.
You're on mute, Co.
Yes. I'm sorry. There's a lot of noise in my house, so I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't going over it. I know it's a little bit difficult to see with some of the resolution that's on screen. There was a lot going on in that 3D setup. Were there elements that you're bringing from Cinema 4D to help identify where things are in your scene?
Yeah. So I brought in a solid for each of the top level of the ice for each of the blocks. There used to be 3 blocks. So that was one of the big changes. I had to take one out. But that gave me the position data for it. And then I created these little grids that would line up to it. So I knew where I could position different plumes or anything on that ice. I knew would stick to it when it was moving with the camera and everything. But yeah, all those layers, they're all just After Effects layers that are in 3D space or different adjustment layers, just meant to sort of jazz up the kind of sad looking render that I did from Cinema.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
The one of the things, again, it's a little bit difficult to see, but there are all of those layers that are really amazing that you brought in as some kind of a reference that helps you design. And you're working also in a 3D comp in After Effects. Is that I know a lot of people aren't very comfortable working in 3D in After Effects. Is that something that you find is comparable to working Cinema 4D's 3D, or?
That's actually my comfort zone, is After Effects 3D. I've made super complicated scenes with a ton of depth and all different angles and layers and stuff. My downfall is when it comes to actual 3D, I'm not as good at it. So that's kind of why I bring it over. I couldn't do refraction and ice in After Effects. It's just not normal. Sure, I might have been able to find a way to fake it, but it's a lot easier to do in Cinema, and I knew that. So I do the hard parts that I can't do in After Effects, and then I just add all the things that make more sense to me in After Effects 3D space.
That's awesome. All right, so I think we have one more clip, which is you're still working in After Effects 3D in this last piece?
I think this one is about how I went into making the plumes and more particle systems, but also not faking a particle system, making something look like particles when it's not actually particles.
Excellent. I love faking stuff.
And then we have some questions afterwards, so I'll play.
Great.
This is the plume animation pre-comp. What it's basically consisting of is a bunch of layers from Photoshop with some offset on them to make them look like they're moving. And that's just a bunch of them that are layered on top of each other to kind of create this sort of brush stroke grainy, sort of particly looking plume, but without using a ton of particles or any of that stuff. Some colored versions, and they all kind of move at different paces. And it's all just using the offset effect to just basically offset the center of this layer, whichever direction you want it to go. And then in order to get this to animate on, I did a transform effect on an adjustment layer with keyframes that have it just go from basically the center where it is when you apply it to off screen. So it looks like it animates on, and you have all these things flying past. And at this point, there's no particles at all. This was essentially the same thing that animated off to take care of that harsh line. So it still looks like just a brush stroke coming off. And that's just feathered, I guess. What is that? It's a stencil alpha. Yeah, of this brush stroke layer. So this part of the plume has no actual particles. It's just Photoshop layers animated on in a way that makes it look like they're moving particles. So if I turn off the effects, this is essentially what we just saw. It's just going straight up. But in order to get that sort of 90-degree bend, I added a mesh warp that bends it. And if I click on it, you can see sort of what I did. This will sort of move it all around, and it can be whatever shape you want it to be in. But this is sort of how I got around trying to figure out how to make a particle system be going one direction and then suddenly turn into another direction, because that was kind of boggling my mind for a little while. Physics in space is weird. Physics in general is weird. The other part of the plume is when whatever's powering it suddenly turns off, when there's not enough pressure to make the plume, it falls. So what I did was I had that original plume just kind of keep going off. So it keeps going and it suddenly just brushes off. Before that goes off, I added this second particle system. And it's just a spray that goes up, and wind and gravity takes it until they all fade away. I made it grayish, black and white, so that I could change the colors or add any tint or anything later. And so this is this second piece here that I added that comes up. I'll solo those. It comes up as this plume is going off. There it is. You can see it's two separate layers, and you'll see they go in separate directions. And then this eventually falls and fades away. But as it's fading away, we have this fan that comes up. It's this dark, black, sort of sooty looking stuff that accumulates on the surface of the ice as the plume falls. And that is a separate layer. That is this. It's just a Photoshop layer, painted fan, positioned to be in line with the ice layer in 3D space, going in the direction that we need it to, sort of underneath this falling debris. And that comes up with just a animation of the histogram levels. So that is how I made the plumes.
That's really awesome.
It's really good.
And look at that. So I know that there are some questions, and it's so funny because I had questions, and I see that in some of the comments there are questions similar to what I had. but I see. Michael, do you want to read them off? I see Victoria Nice in there, and there she is. This is one of my favorite questions.
How is the workflow different? It's funny. It's pretty much the same. They're a client, right? You over the course of my working in motion graphics and animation for over 10 years, like it's started out, well, you learn quickly to work in a way that allows you to make changes pretty easily, or at least the least disruptive way. So you kind of work non-destructive, like not compressing all your layers into everything, and approaching a project knowing that you're going to have changes. The cool thing is you also get with this sort of subject is that for me, you get to learn about the science as well. So you're like, oh, that's so cool. This ice and like plumes and what? There's two wind directions. Like that for me is kind of the coolest part. Like you get to actually learn about it yourself too. But as far as workflow goes, it's pretty much the same as any other client. You just have to realize that sometimes you're dealing more abstract, and sometimes you're dealing more to the letter, like scientifically, or to the, like you have math and data that you have to deal with. But for the most part, it's like anything else. Next thing I'm excited about for cinema is probably, so I don't know much about cinema. I think I've tried to make that clear. So for me, the next thing I'm excited to learn is like maybe actual lighting and texturing and like making something look decent, or you know what, modeling, because I still just take primitives and like combine them together to make like a satellite or something. Like I don't know how to actually model it in a way that makes sense. So that's probably, yeah.
We've all been there. We've all started there somewhere. Actually, EJ is in here. iDesign, a great place to start if you want to get a few minutes of tutorials in a day.
I have used a lot of his tutorials, so thank you, EJ. What is the animation for? That is a moon of Neptune, and it is Triton. It's a suspected ocean world, and it's super exciting.
I think that's it.
I did have one of the other things that are exciting are we have a helicopter in space,
Yes.
and you probably will be seeing some kind of animation request come across your desk at some time in the future.
Potentially, yeah.
So who you said it's like any other client to design these animations? Do you have like different tiers of animation requests? Like, are they for like scientists or lay people or educators who are kind of in between the scientist and lay person level?
It's kind of all of it. We do a lot of stuff for public outreach. So like explaining like how the rover got to Mars, or any of that type of stuff, or like telling the public like what we're actually working on, or explaining a new piece of finding that they found about somewhere in space or whatnot, or even on Earth. Earth is a big thing on Earth Day, so that's yay. But yeah, so it's for the public, it's for education, it's for internal stuff, just kind of getting scientists to understand their own, data and see it visually versus just as numbers or something.
Right. And that kind of leads me to the question about design. Like for you, is it fun to just like, I'm just going to make ice today. I'm going to make some ice textures and put it on a cube and I made ice? Or is it a little bit nerve-wracking because like, oh, this group of scientists that's all they do is ice. They don't even do rover stuff. They're the ice people. Like, is it a little nerve-wracking to know that your Photoshop ice is going to them?
Most of it's pretty open, unless it's something that, because we don't actually know, and it's already so stylized. The place where it comes into that is more like the process of how the plume goes up or where it's coming from. That's more of what they're worried about, not necessarily like really what it looks like, as long as, but it's also depends on the client. But most of it's pretty open, and just you get to make really pretty things, and they're happy about it because they get to see their work about, visually versus on words or numbers or graphs.
I think we have another question that just came in.
Animating things for WhatsApp is wonderful. I get to do little, like, WhatsApp is a monthly sort of series about stargazing, what's in the sky for that month. And we do it every month. And occasionally there's like this little like animated moon and Earth character, and I have like animated planet characters that are super fun because they have arms and eyes, and get to do silly stuff with that one. But that one's a lot of fun. So yeah, you should check out What's Up. If you ever want to know what's in the sky or like constellations, it's a really good starter for what's going on in the sky.
Nice. For those of us who know Cinema 4D and need help figuring out constellations and what's going on in the sky, maybe that's what we need to spend our monthly checkup on. Mm-hmm. Well, aside from all the animation talk, what scientifically NASA JPL side are you like excited about? I mean, helicopter on Mars is pretty fun.
I mean, just personally, that's like super cool to see. Like even just the images coming back from from Perseverance rover is so cool. Like, and there's still curiosity. There's so much cool stuff going on in space, and it's like never ending. Like, 50 years ago, we never saw this type of stuff. Like it's so cool. We get to see images from Mars a day later. Like that's the neatest thing in the world to me.
It's amazing. So, yeah.
Anything, like it's mind boggling, right? I don't know. Like maybe we're all just so used to like, yeah, it's a picture of Mars. Obviously. Like they're rocks on a planet in another planet, right? So cool.
And there's a guy in a room here controlling a remote control helicopter there.
Yes, not remote control though.
Or,
but yes,
technically.
There's a flight plan.
Yes.
Yeah, it's so cool. Like to be that rover driver or that pilot, which another pilot, like, oh my God, it's just so cool. Everything in space. It's amazing.
Well, you're amazing. Thank you so much, Lisa, for coming and joining us this month. It was so much fun to see your work. I can't wait to see what you do next. I definitely can't wait to see everyone in person. And I know that you are an awesome part of our DMALA family. And we always love to come see your stuff at Barnstall. And it's so great to see your stuff virtually again.
Thanks. I'm really happy I can be here and hang out, even if it is virtually.
Well, thanks everyone. Thanks everyone for coming. And we're going to do this again next month. So we'll see you then.
Bye.